What is going on, everybody? It is your observant lineman, Uche Nwaneri, and welcome to the Lineman Life podcast. Glad to have everybody here who's in the chat. This has obviously been another wild week in the NFL. Another wild week in the NFL, not only when it comes to the playoff picture, but also just in the workings of these different teams and these myriad of issues that just continue to come up for teams at different times. Nothing's ever really been predictable thus far this season. We're going to look into a lot of those things as we kind of recap Week 14 moving forward. But I want to talk about some other football news. Some football news that deals more in the college football realm. Obviously, one of the big stories in college football right now is Sarah Fuller and what she's doing out at Vanderbilt. And while there is something to be said for an athlete playing two sports, trying to be competitive, I think that we're missing a lot of what is really important when it comes to players and athletes who have put in the time, put in the work, and put themselves in a position to finally be able to get playing time on the field. And, you know, the media's run with this Sarah Fuller story as though this is the first time anything like this has ever happened, as if this is the first time that there has been a female kicker in amongst the ranks of football players and football teammates. And while it's not been the first time, she is the first to score a point in the Power 5 conferences, which, you know, to be honest, you know, that's more of an additive description than really to say and to really kind of project that she is in the sport and has been in the sport and has been playing the sport. And that's something that's just not really the case. And while I do give her kudos for being the first to score a point in the Power 5, you know, we have to also understand that stage was set in a pretty manufactured way for her to get that opportunity. And one of the reasons why I say that is because of articles coming out of places like Deadspin that we're going to take a look at now. And this article from Deadspin really does, in my opinion, speak to more of the truth behind this situation and the way it's being celebrated, and what the actual reality of the situation is, what the nature of the situation is, that a lot of media outlets are missing right now. And this is an article by Jane McManus. So this is a female perspective on the entire situation, talking about Sarah Fuller as a first avoids the uncomfortable conversation of Katie Nida. And we'll go through this article. It's not a super long article, obviously, but it's got some detail to it. We'll go through the article, and I'll kind of give you guys my thoughts as we go through it, because, you know, honestly, I've not read the article. I just saw the article in my, you know, kind of headline research for the day, and, you know, I felt like this was definitely something worth talking about, because it does give the perspective of another woman looking at this situation from the outside. And I think that's important. I think that to a certain extent, as men, you know, our logic can fall on deaf ears, because at the end of the day, you know, it's not a trend for women to necessarily be playing in men's football. So when it does happen, you have scenarios where the attention is put on that aspect rather than really paying attention to the grander scope of it and where this individual athlete should be in that scope. But let's start this article off. And like I said, as we go through it, I'll let you guys know what I think. But it says here, just after Sarah Fuller calmly kicked her first extra point for Vanderbilt yesterday in a game against Tennessee, ESPN sent out the alert. With her successful PAT, Sarah Fuller becomes the first woman to score in a Power 5 game. And that has been the refrain in the last 3 weeks as Fuller's story gains speed. There is so much respect for the work that Fuller put in under the brightest of complicated spotlights. The athlete stepped over from her varsity sports soccer to fill a need for the Commodores due to a COVID decimated roster, and has filled in admirably, culminating in 2 successful kicks Saturday. And honestly, given what she had said in the weeks following her appearance, she seems like a pretty cool person. Now, clearly, building up a little bit, just kind of a rehash of what has happened since she's joined the team. And, all of that's perfectly fine to me. She's speaking to the personality of the girl a little bit. That's fine. Have no issues with that whatsoever. Let's continue on. And yet, noting that Fuller is the first woman in a Power 5 game is like saying Baker Mayfield is the first Power 5 player from Oklahoma to win the Heisman. Sounds like quite a feat, except Oklahoma had Sam Bradford in 2008. The birth of the term Power 5 as a concept is only a year or two older, and generally when these records get noted, it's in the context of FBS teams. So that right there is kind of putting into perspective really what a first in the sport means. A first in the sport means the most in regard to the FBS. It's not the Power 5. Power 5 is a recent concept that doesn't really speak to the entire scope of college football, which it should always speak to the entire scope, because college football, especially on the Division I level, is one particular level. There's not a level within the level. It's just one level of the collegiate scene. So says here, this isn't shade, it's context. Fuller doesn't have to be the first to matter, to have her accomplishments be just as impressive, to have her path be just as difficult. But let's not erase the other women in this tiny sorority. Katie Hnida became the first woman to kick points in an FBS game in 2003 for New Mexico, and April Gross followed that up for Kent State in 2015. Both of these women were football players, part of their respective teams for years. Key phrase that I think a lot of people are not really grasping when they talk about this entire subject of Sarah Fuller kicking for Vanderbilt, is that these are people who played with their teams for years. That is a teammate. You know what I mean? Like, there is a different layers to this, and that's just how I see it. So, says football players, part of their respective teams for years before getting their opportunities. Fuller's story is inspiring, and her approach to pressure is excellent, but it isn't to be confused with systemic progress, which may be why it is easier for college football rights holders to haul Fuller's accomplishment as first woman rather than looking at the complexity that is the history of women in kicking. There have been other women in the game as well. Williamette's Liz Heaton, Jacksonville State's Ashley Martin, West Alabama's Tanya Butler, and Lebanon Valley's Brittany Ryan. The first one through the wall is often bloodied. Is a quote that someone gave Hnida a long time ago, and she has put it on her wall to remind her that breaking barriers is painful. Hnida first played football in Colorado, where she said she was raped by a teammate. Hope I don't get demonetized for saying that. She went public 4 years later, but charges were never filed. You can easily find her story. The way her coach, Gary Barnett, insulted her, the backlash on the Colorado campus, the abuse she endured from Colorado University fans, and our apologists included. Hnida also found the support of her new teammates in New Mexico, where she transferred and played. After experiencing the worst of what defying gender roles can bring, she found a team in every sense of the word and the best of what sports has to offer. So as you see there, just some examples of women who have already been, who've already went through that path, who have already traveled that journey and have had, different situations play out, different scenarios. Obviously with Hnida being in a situation that obviously is a very serious crime if proven to be true. But also on the other side of that, she's been able to find her own true teammates in New Mexico as a member of their football team. And, she was able to actually be, understand how that kind of brotherhood, that kind of family nature in football is built and maintained. And those players have your back, and those players, treat you as family. These are things that we see in sports, and you see it mostly just one side with the athletes and the men in the locker room. But in her situation, she was obviously given that same kind of treatment, brought into the circle of trust per se with the football team, and has seen the best of what can become with that. So Snyder's story is likely part of the reason Fuller gets the first woman headline. Easier to ring fence the ridiculously short Power 5 era than tell Hanaida's story again. You can't have the lighthearted celebration when you are forced to remember how sports can treat those women who dare to break the barriers. And of course, Fuller is only 3 weeks into her career and already gets a piece of that. There are some who complain that women in sports are not notable at all and wonder what Fuller is doing on the team to begin with. And, I think that in a lot of cases, people who are asking those questions are asking them because of the information that's out there about what Vanderbilt's situation was really like. Vanderbilt had multiple other kickers who had been with the team, who still had eligibility, who were offered to come back and kick, and they were refused. They had guys who were on the team already. We see one of those guys in the kicker that they had on Saturday, who kicked a 39-yard field goal, brother. I forget his name at the moment, but he was there. He was available. He was there to kick a field goal. And why is it that he's kicking field goals, but he's not kicking the extra point? I mean, it's either you have the best players out there or you don't. I just don't understand where, it's wrong to point that out, that if you have players who are qualified to play at a certain position and are the best at that position, that's why you have a first team and a second team. You have a starter and you have a backup. These are the guys best qualified to go out there, or the guys who have been chosen to go out there first, and everybody else who's behind them is, playing a support role. Why is it that you now pick and choose where you're going to have someone who's going to be your kicker on extra points, but it's not going to be your kicker if there's a game-winning field goal that needs to be made from 50 yards out? I thought those are supposed to be the same people as far as football is concerned. But, we see what it is. No sooner had she kicked that devoted misogynist Clay Travis tweeted, "So Vandy has a field goal kicker who just made a 39-yard field goal, but Sarah Fuller is kicking their extra points, and you're telling me this isn't a stunt? Come on," quote unquote, or quote closed. And Clay Travis has been vocal on Twitter about that. And in this regard, I have to say, it makes sense. Why would you have two different kickers for kicking field goals? That's not really something that you see in football. You have a punter and you have a kicker. The kicker is kicking any of the field goals. The kicker is kicking the extra points. The kicker is kicking the kickoffs. The punter is punting on fourth down. The punter is kicking on a free kick after a safety. But you don't have three kickers or two kickers and a punter, but three people kicking. That just doesn't really make sense. That's not how the sport sees that position in terms of just roster number. Like, you only have two. You don't have three. Unless somebody gets hurt and you got to sign somebody, but even then you're saving that roster spot, at least on the professional level. But I can, Clay Travis, I don't agree with a lot of things he says, but there are times when he says things that do make sense to me when you just look at it from a football perspective, and this does make sense. Even Fuller's teammates have said, this isn't a stunt. Come on. The team was struggling. The coronavirus impacted it, and then Coach Derek Mason explained it like this before he was asked. "I'm not about making statements. this was out of necessity. You look at our week, our students had gone home. The ability to have access to students and tryouts was almost nil in terms of like what's available. That's just what happened to be the most viable option. To be clear, no one gets this into the weeds about a mediocre college team's kicking depth chart until one of them is a woman. Really? Well, nobody would have cared about Vanderbilt's kicking depth chart had it not been paraded or celebrated as if this was the first time that a woman has ever kicked in any kind of meaningful way. We know that it's not true. We know that there have been women who kick. We know that there are women who kick way better. And, you know, it would have never been a story if it wasn't made a story. That's what it boils down to. Then you've got a bunch of incels and testosterone supplements talking about insoles and ball placement like they were Scott fucking Norwood's backup. Well, you know, it's funny when she says this in the article. If you want to hear the appropriate terminology from people who played the position, Pat McAfee, he talked about the entire situation with the laces being pointed the wrong way when she was kicking the ball. That's a professional Pro Bowl kicker. That's a guy who's been a Pro Bowl punter for years in the NFL for the Indianapolis Colts. And he was even, you know, a person who pointed out that they weren't, you know, the ball wasn't really set up right to have her kick it. And, you know, of course, we all know that the squib kick is not a strategy that's used when you're losing a football game. You don't squib kick balls when you're losing football games. You squib kick balls when you're winning football games to try and get the clock to start on the kick return. That's football, situational football 101 right there. Of course, a woman can never just play in a football game. Well, what is playing in a football game? That's where a lot of my issue comes from, is what is playing in a football game? Because just kicking the ball is only a part of it. You know, if she's going to be a kicker, she's going to be in there kicking, then she would have to be in there for the duration of the play as a viable player, one that can be tackled, one that can be blocked, one that has to make a tackle, one that has to make a block, if necessary. These are all things that, you know, as football players, we look at that, and that is part of the situation. When she first did the kickoff to start her career with Vanderbilt, she ran to the sideline right after the kick. Now, if that kick had been returned, which I think we all know, there was a little communication between both teams. There was to be no return. But if that kicker's returned, she has to make a play. That's what's going to be expected of any other kicker, because they're kicker. Now, if she gets that field goal, or that extra point rather, the other day blocked, she's going to have to be involved in the physicality of that play. These are the things that you talk about when you talk about playing football. These are the things that matter to the role of the player during a football game. It's just how it works. That's just how it works. And we're going to talk about another player who also made history for Arizona State University as a running back, first Chinese-born immigrant to ever score a touchdown or to ever play in the FBS. But we'll talk about that here in a second. Let's finish up this article. It says, this story exposes all the awfulness in the conversation around sports. The idea that it is either a celebration or condemnation of Fuller, depending on how you come down on the idea of women playing a man's game, as though games were exclusive to one gender. And I mean, these are just things that I find hypocritical, because if that's the case, then what's to stop a man from going and playing in a woman's sport and dominating the sport? Would it be unfair that man goes down to a woman's level? Can we send LeBron James to the WNBA to help boost their ratings? and let him play with them, I mean, they would complain that that's not fair, that a man shouldn't be able to go down and play a woman's sport for obvious reasons. That's where I kind of lose my patience with some of this stuff, because it's like, okay, one side is being given that benefit of the doubt and being celebrated. But if we say, okay, then no sport is exclusive to any gender. Everybody is free to go play whatever sport they want, regardless of whatever gender they are. If that's what y'all want, then shoot, I'm about to go sign up for the LFL, for the Legends Football League, the Lingerie Football League. I mean, shoot, I'll put some tights on and I'll go out there and start blocking the hell out of people for money. Why not? But that would be fair, right? That would be equal, right? That would be allowing me to go and play in a league of football as a football player, whether it was a men or a women's football league. Those are the kind of things that I get. I lose patience. I get confused and lose patience because now it doesn't make any sense. But as we go through, let's finish this up. Fuller would be an interesting footnote in the Vanderbilt season if it weren't for gender. What makes this a story is that women are systematically excluded from men's sports, so that when one of them works her way up to the starting roster or takes the opportunity in the oddest of pandemic seasons, it's a bit of a surprise. The gatekeepers let this one through. And that's why Nida has been so elusive in the context around Fuller's accomplishments. Hanida is a reminder that these stories aren't just confetti and you go girl. Where are the women who are on football teams and working their way up the roster? There is no reason there shouldn't be more. After Fuller made the Vanderbilt team, Nida received 7 bouquets from her New Mexico teammates. She checked the cards. They remembered Nida broke through the wall and she bears the scars. And that's the end of that article. But just to kind of bring it full circle with my thoughts on this is that, at least from what I'm understanding and reading this article by Jane McManus, she wants to have her cake and eat it too. She wants there to be celebration. She sees that there shouldn't be any kind of separation between men and women in sports, which, hey, I'm not going to say I have necessarily an opinion on that, because if that's the way y'all want it, then then it can be that way. Just don't complain at the results. That's all I can say. Just don't complain at the results. And also with knowing that Hanida was the first, Katie Hanida was the first kicker to really be a member of the team and really be in the culture of football, not just, be brought on in an emergency situation, to see that there is really someone who has a true understanding of what it means to be a teammate. And yes, she got put through hell in Colorado. She was able to go over to New Mexico. She's had a much different situation there. And to be able to, look at this and see someone who's actually put in the time, put in the blood, the sweat, the tears, all of it, it does show that she has a true family in her New Mexico teammates, because they know she's been there with them from the very beginning, from the start of the season, from the beginning of training camps. These are all proving grounds for athletes, for football players, and whether it be football players or basketball players, whatever sport, those first few months preparing for a season, those are the proving grounds. Those are the times where people are, putting out the most in terms of effort and energy, and having the least in way of comfort, in order to build a rapport and to build connections with their teammates, when they go out there during the regular season and play games, whether it be on Saturdays or Sundays, whether it be on Fridays, doesn't matter. That's just how you build that unity amongst teammates. And it's just not something that you're going to see that's just going to be completely developed and accepted when somebody's, basically made the center of attention on a team for the simple fact that she's come in to kick a ball. She's come in to kick a ball, and she hasn't really, outside of scoring a single point, hasn't really done that much in way of, I would think, showing any legitimate barrier breaking just as an athlete, because there are a lot of people who can kick, who could have made that kick she made, and a lot of women who could have made that kick she made. Let's be real. But moving from that into a story that's somewhere along the same lines as the Sarah Fuller situation, we have the Sun Devils running back, Jackson He. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this guy's situation. Jackson He was a Chinese immigrant who came to the U.S. He decided to join and walk on the Arizona Sun Devil football team, Arizona State's team. And this is a situation, again, where if you really look at this and you really kind of pay attention to how this situation's played out for him, it's really more along the lines of how things really should be and really do end up being for people who are being brought on the team and who want to work their way up to be, a contributing member on the team. And we're going to look at this guy's play here real quick. Going to make it a brief run. This is a running back. This is a guy who's coming at running back for Arizona at the goal line. This is a guy who's going to have to carry the ball, protect the ball, run the ball with the attempt to get it in the end zone. He is participating in the play in its fullest. And let's take a look.
He looking for the end zone, trying the legs, and he is there. It's a touchdown for Jackson He. What a night for that young man. Boy, you can't help but feel for that kind of story. That young man, the fight, the determined.
And, and we'll leave it there, but Jackson He, and let me real quick, let me just pull him up real quick. Okay. So his story was a bit of a different one, and I'm going to go through this real quick here and talk about his situation, and we can compare. You can compare and look at how his journey to become a contributing member on a football team differs from that of a person like Sarah Fuller. It says, in the waning minutes of a blowout win over its interstate rival, Arizona State saw one of its players make some history. Up 63-7 in the fourth quarter. It took until they were up 63-7 for them to be able to say, okay, you know what? Let's give this guy a shot. And, he took full advantage of that. He was patient, took full advantage of it. But it says, the Sun Devils put in walk-on running back Jackson He to run it in from the goal line. Met near the end zone by an unblocked defender. Somebody ain't blocking. He muscled the ball in and caused the sideline to go nuts. He's believed to be the first Chinese-born player to score a touchdown in the history of the FBS. Per Fox Sports, he came to America from China at the age of 17 and played only a year of high school football before walking on to Arizona State. He wasn't a preferred walk-on or anything like that, though. And a preferred walk-on is somebody who was actually recruited, somebody who ended up not being able to get a scholarship offered to them, but they're given walk-on status with some of the scholarship player perks that come along with that. They're taken care of sort of like a scholarship player, but not quite. But it is, you are someone who is asked to come to the school as a walk-on. But he just came to the school and asked if he could walk on as a football player, which really, you're basically giving yourself up as a tackling dummy. You're volunteering to be a tackling dummy for the duration of the season when you are a non-preferred walk-on. You're going to be in there just as a scout guy, you basically don't have a chance of coming on the field as a player. So that's just a little bit of knowledge for you there. He simply showed up to the Sun Devil student athlete facility once he arrived in Tempe, walked into the football offices, and said he wanted to walk on, according to AZ Family. After a quick review of the game film that showed the 5'9", 220-pounder's quick feet and downhill running, he was playing on the scout team. He remains the only known Chinese-born player in the entire FBS and carries the title with pride through the Chinese characters on his jersey nameplate. I want to prove that Chinese can play football or okay. He says, I want to prove that Chinese can play really good football, he said. I have a chip on my shoulder. I want everybody to recognize us. We can have success, not just in basketball, but in football too. So here you go. We have a picture here of Jackson He, and you've seen the video footage of him participating as a football player, him being in the game as a football player. And yes, these guys were blowing out Arizona. I don't think anybody's going to necessarily say that he was put in the game during crunch time. He wasn't. He was put in garbage time. But these guys on the other side of the ball, those are all scholarship players for Arizona. He is not. He is a walk-on. He is a Chinese-born walk-on who has been with the team the entire season. Has been the tackling dummy, has been the scout guy, and he's earned his stripes. He's given an opportunity to go into a game and to play the game on the same level as other scholarship athletes. This may very well have been the first game he's ever dressed as a player on game day, because generally you don't have walk-on guys dressed out as players. They're sitting in the stands watching the game. This isn't even a home game. This is an away game. So right there, kind of clear to see that there's a difference between how things are handled in the true nature of football as compared to a situation where it's more a manufactured scenario that is played up by the media. And hey, I'm just pointing it out because I understand the culture and I understand how these teams, how teams and how football generally, comes to decisions about personnel. It's not something that's manufactured. It's all based on skill. It's based on who is the best, period. And that's how it's always been with football for the most part. 99.9%. Football is a game where if you're not good enough in time, you will be exposed to not being good enough. And when you compete with your teammates day in and day out, the cream rises to the crop. And if you're going to tell me that an individual who walks on as a non-preferred walk-on from a foreign land, you telling me that his situation is not just as noteworthy as what they make Sarah Fuller's situation to be out, or to be considered such a celebration. It just doesn't fit the shoe. The foot doesn't fit in the shoe, because this guy has gone through the process that she will never go through. She will never have to come in for training camp. She will never have to come in and actually put in work for the team. She just came in, kicked, and got the credit, and got the celebrity and got the focus. While this guy we'll hear his name this week, we'll never hear it again, ever. He could score 3 touchdowns next week. You're not going to hear about it. So just once again, Jackson He barrels through a defender and he gets the touchdown. He barrels through the defender and he gets the touchdown. So, that's the way it is. But make sure, if you have not already done so, make sure you smash that like button. And of course, if you haven't subscribed to the Observant Lineman, make sure you are doing just that. Let's flip it over now and let's get into this week in the NFL. Week 14. Week 14 was a wild one. We've seen a number of different teams come out as we get closer to the playoffs as we are in the December to remember. There are a number of different scenarios that have been playing out in the NFL, and a number of those scenarios are really impacting what all is going to happen in as we approach the last few weeks of the season. Now, obviously, big games that we saw with the Saints losing to the Eagles, with the Bucks, Tampa Bay Buccaneers in their game this past weekend, the Buffalo Bills knocking off the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was another huge game. But we're going to real quickly go through. I'll give you my quick thoughts. I obviously didn't watch all the games, but I will run through these scores and talk a little bit about some of the games that really, have been decisive in how the NFL playoff picture is about to play out. A lot of teams that had to get things done and have to get things done for the rest of the way. But I think that obviously you got to start with the Philadelphia Saints game. Jalen Hurts coming in at quarterback. First time as a starting quarterback for the Eagles. Carson Wentz, I did a video on Carson Wentz earlier in the season about his struggles, not only with his offensive lineman, but also just his struggles in being able to recognize what's going on in front of him and use his quarterback position to put himself in the best spot to make plays during the course of a game. But it is now the Jalen Hurts era, it appears, in Philadelphia. He had 167 passing yards and a touchdown, and he also tacked on 106 rushing yards at 19 a carry. New Orleans, obviously this is a hugely disappointing game for them. Taysom Hill, he had a couple of turnovers, and this was a game that really, in order to seal that top seed, New Orleans needed to get this win. For the Eagles, I guess this is more of a what appears to be a riding of the ship. But the Eagles get the win over New Orleans. Now New Orleans is playing catch up to Green Bay in the NFC. They could have had that top seed, weren't able to get that sealed up, and that's going to cost them big time, obviously, as we get into this playoff season. Now the funny thing about that, for me, honestly, is that I never really felt like the team that was the top seed in either conference I never felt like that really was as big an advantage with the bye week, getting a bye week in the playoffs, as a lot of people try to make it out to be. I mean, obviously, not having to play in that wild card round, to some it may feel like it's an advantage, but we've seen it time and time again where teams get that first bye week in the playoffs, be in the top seed, have home field advantage, and it's all for naught because they end up losing their first game in the playoffs. We saw it happen to Baltimore last year. We saw it happen to Kansas City, I believe, a year or two before that, when they lost at home to I guess they didn't lose their first game, but they lost at home to the New England Patriots. But really, for New Orleans, for everything that they've had to go through over the past few years, they needed that one. They needed that, and they needed that win to kind of get them set up. Because I think for them, especially with Drew Brees being hurt, I think for them, they could use a bye week in the playoffs to kind of set their bearings and get ready to play. But obviously that was a huge loss for the Saints. Also in yesterday's action, Buffalo knocking off the Steelers. The Steelers have now dropped 2 in a row. I think that Josh Allen is really, he is officially knocked the Buffalo Bills into the elite tier, which we're going to have to make some adjustments on the tier maker come Wednesday. But the Steelers now dropping 2 in a row. It appears that the cracks are starting to show at the worst times. And that's always been one of those fears that I've always had for teams that go on these long winning streaks, is that eventually that winning streak has got to come to an end. But you really want those winning streaks to end sooner rather than later, because the later they end, the more that it can affect the outcome or the outlook of the season. And for the Steelers, looks like they're paying a little bit right now. But Juju, I think this is something that definitely we're going to have to see what Juju Smith-Schuster thinks about Stephon Diggs dancing in this Steelers end zone now, because what he did in Buffalo yesterday obviously ended up being billboard material for the Bills, giving them a little bit of an extra motivation to see this guy come out on their field in Buffalo and start doing those wacky dances out on their field. It's never something you want to do if you're trying to keep your focus on the game. I know Juju Schuster is, I know he's a likable guy. I know he's a likable, very kind of a very fun kind of guy, right? But he should know better. You don't dance on another team's logo, because then you get them to respond to you a little bit like this here. So there you see it right there. Josh Allen telling his team, let them do all the talking, all the fucking dancing. We fucking work. And work they did. Work into Pittsburgh straight to their second loss in a row. And now what appeared to be a record-breaking season for the Pittsburgh Steelers is quickly, now turning to some things that they got to be concerned about. They don't have a run game. This is a team that has not had a run game the entire season, and people have just let that slide and said, hey, they're just Pittsburgh being Pittsburgh. No, they're not. Pittsburgh being Pittsburgh is a team that comes downhill at you 20 plus times a game with their running game. It's a team that has had some of the best running backs in recent eras in the NFL. And in 2020, that's nowhere to be found. They have nothing. I think they're averaging less than 2.5 yards a carry in their running game on the season. And that's just terrible. So now they're in a situation where teams are clearly figuring out the passing game. They're figuring it out. The good ones are. And, you can't just depend on your, on these last second bailouts to get wins. Now they have to be able to control games, and you're not seeing that. That's what Buffalo hit them with a balanced attack, a balanced run and pass game attack that left them pretty much wanting. Their defense held out as long as it could, but eventually the Buffalo Bills won out because they're a much more balanced team. Pittsburgh is running into that issue right now in not having the balance to be able to carry them through as they clearly have hoped that they would. But it all comes down to playing the game the way it's supposed to be played. You're not going to go through this NFL playoffs without running the ball, without having an effective run game. You're not going to find a team be successful in the playoffs without being able to run. The Steelers aren't able to run, and I think that's what's going to be their undoing in the end. 11-0 looked nice until it didn't, and now I'd rather be a 9-3 and figuring out how to get my team back into a strong position through our running game and a balanced attack than to be 11-0 or to be 12-0 or to be 13-0 and just waiting and hoping that nobody figures out how to shut down our one-dimensional attack so that we can try and ride this through to the Super Bowl. That's just not how things work. And I would think that Mike Tomlin would see something like that and would understand that, there has to be a run game solution at some point, or this is all going to fall apart. Because as it stands, We have built our season on a house of cards. It will only take one defense stopping us, shutting us down to provide the blueprint for everyone else. And that's clearly something that we see happening right now in Pittsburgh. As I look, and let me check and see what their schedule looks like the rest of the way. Let's see here. Let's see what their schedule looks like the rest of the way. So they've got a key game with the Browns. That's going to be at the end of the season in Cleveland. That's a team that Cleveland team is a team that's playing some hellified football right now. Don't get it twisted. Cleveland is playing some good ball, and their defense is playing very well. And their defense is going to be studying the film of the last two games from the Steelers against the Bills and against Washington to decipher the code to shutting down the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Colts isn't going to be a walk in the park either. That's another team that's fighting for its playoff life. That's going to be a team that is going to be looking at a lot of film from these last 2 weeks, really these last 3 weeks against the Ravens, the Washington redacted team, and the Bills in order to find out what's their best course of attack. The Bengals, the Bengals, for as bad as they are, they're going to try and run with one of those game plans from the Bills and from Washington. They're going to try and run with that because that is what's working right now against Pittsburgh. You pressure them up front, you make them get the ball out, make them throw balls that are off of the timing routes, and you keep their defense on the field with a controlled, balanced attack, and you're going to be in the best position possible come the end of the game. But those were some of the biggest games of the week. Minnesota obviously losing to Tampa Bay. That's another big game, but I think Tampa Bay, by all intents and purposes, when you look at the Bucs, you're not really seeing a team that I'm not really seeing a team that I think is gonna really make a push. It's really gonna make it happen for the postseason. I just don't see that happening. They're a team with infinite offensive firepower, but somehow they just cannot be consistent. And it's just not. I just don't see it happening. Let's see. We look through the rest of these scores. Kansas City and Miami. I thought that this was a big game. I initially turned this game off because it looked to be a blowout, but the Dolphins made a game of it. Tua Tagovailoa actually had a pretty good game. 316 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. He had 1 interception. He had a rushing touchdown. But he is showing the flashes of being that top draft pick, of being that franchise quarterback. We're starting to see it. We're starting to see his patience, which is one of the things that I really thought went really well for him in the course of that game against the Chiefs. They weren't able to pull out the win. Patrick Mahomes, by all stretches of the imagination, had an awful day at quarterback. He threw 3 interceptions. There may be some things he needs to tweak in his game moving forward, but I'm not going to consider that some huge worry of mine looking at him from, his grander, larger body of work. He is I still consider him the best quarterback along with guys like Aaron Rodgers in the NFL. But Tua Tagovailoa, he had a heck of a game. The kid's release is so buttery smooth. Like, he's got a nice release. He's really patient. He didn't force any throws. He wasn't trying to score a touchdown every time he dropped back in the pocket. He took what the Chiefs gave him. He made smart plays. He didn't put his body in a lot of harm's way. And he didn't put his receivers in a bunch of harm's way, which is got to be something that his receivers have got to be thankful for, because some quarterbacks who get into that mode of trying to score because they're down and they want to get that ball in the end zone as quick as they can, sometimes they end up, giving their receivers a hospital pass, getting them laid out across the middle, getting them laid out at the sideline. So definitely was good watching him play. And you just got to know you're seeing the future of the NFL with a guy like Tua. You're seeing the future. Him, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, even though he's having a down year this year, we're seeing him do some things. Josh Allen, these are the new perennial, faces of the NFL. This is the next era of great quarterbacks that we can see thus far in the NFL. Tua is still a rookie, so obviously we'll have to see more from him moving into next season. But, I mean, we've seen Josh Allen progress. We've seen him mature before our very eyes and become an elite-level quarterback. And, yes, I believe he is an elite-level quarterback in the NFL now. And you see, as we head into the twilight of guys like Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, we see these guys' careers coming to that inevitable end in the next few years. We can see where the league as an offense is going to begin to be geared more towards, and this is an exciting future for the NFL. I think with these quarterbacks and how they play the game, I think that it's going to provide for a lot of really good matchups. And you look at Miami. Well, Miami, I believe, is in the same division as Buffalo, so there is going to be a rivalry that's going to be potentially there for years to come between those two teams, between Miami and Buffalo. We'll see how that all plays out. But really, it's Miami's trying to keep pace. I think they're punching above their weight as usual this season. Next year, I'll say that's what's expected of them. But I think they punched above their weight. They gave the Chiefs a game. They weren't able to pull it back and recover from that third quarter just shellacking that they took in the third. I mean, it was so bad in the third quarter. They give up a touchdown immediately in the first drive of the third. Then they go 3 and out. They punt the ball, give up a punt return for a touchdown immediately. And before you know it, it's 28 to 10. And it's looking like it's going to be a blowout. So, this is a franchise that is moving in the right direction in Miami, and I expect that they're going to continue to build upon what they got right now at Tua Tagovailoa at QB. Arizona blows out the Giants. I think we all kind of expected that this team would ride its ship against the Giants. I mean, you expect it. You don't necessarily. You don't want to bet money on it, but, the Giants have been showing a little bit here in the last couple of weeks, so that would have given you something to think about. The Chargers get the win over the Falcons. The Colts get the win over Vegas. That was a huge loss for the Las Vegas Raiders. This pretty much shoots down any hopes that they're going to be coming out into the play and being a factor in the playoff picture as we head into the end of the season. The Jets take another shellacking. Nobody surprised with that. Philadelphia, obviously, they beat the Saints. Green Bay gets the win over their rivals, Detroit. And the Washington football team beats the 49ers. And I think these are all games that, have their own particular significance. I think that the Colts and Vegas game was really a game that was a must-win for the Raiders. And Derek Carr, 2 picks. He's started off the season hot, and since then he's kind of been streaky. I think that it's going to be a hard call on whether or not John Gruden's going to decide to go with a quarterback with pick number 1 in the draft. But I think Derek Carr will have some people who will be interested in him. The guy he's played well this season. He's had some streaky parts to it, but overall, I'd say that he has had at least a satisfactory, season compared to the last couple years that he's dealt with a bunch of injuries. Russell Wilson, obviously getting back on track, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. He's been throwing a lot of interceptions. I think that has to do with some of the imbalances in their play calling. They've been putting him. They've been dropping him back a ton in the last 6 games, and the Seahawks have they're number 1 in the amount of dropbacks by the quarterback this year anyway. So he's been throwing the ball way too much, and I think that that's something that if they don't watch it could affect how that team is able to perform in the playoffs, because we've seen it happen on the grandest of stages for the Seahawks when they were in the Super Bowl, for instance. And instead of giving it to the man that we all know should have got the ball down at the 1 yard line, they decided they're going to throw a quick slant and make Malcolm Butler a Super Bowl hero as he picked it off to seal the win for the New England Patriots, for Tom Brady and the Patriots when all looked to be lost. And that was, dropping back and throwing the ball when he didn't really need to. So, you see that a lot from the Seahawks. It's kind of become their thing now. Now that they haven't had, the presence, the prowess with their running game that they'd had in the past with Marshawn Lynch back there. They just haven't had that. They haven't had that. But we'll see how that plays out for them. Now, Minnesota, I think this is worth kind of talking about just because this was a big game for Minnesota. Minnesota actually had put themselves in great position in their playoff picture. They were actually in the hunt, mainly because they squeezed off some wins, and they had a nice little streak going. They had won 5 of their last 6 before the Tampa Bay game, and they had plenty of opportunities to build a lead in this game, if not for Dan Bailey and his kicking woes. And this, to me, is just another example of how the kicker position requires a true level of skill in order to really have the kind of respect, have the kind of level influence with their own teammates. And this is from one of the guys this is from a kicker who was considered one of the best in the NFL, one of the best in his time as a kicker in the NFL. He was with the Cowboys, where he went to multiple Pro Bowls from his kicking. And this guy had quite the breakdown on Sunday when it came to kicking the ball. We'll go through this article quickly to round up this episode of Lineman Life. It says these names may trigger 4 horsemen of the apocalypse type vibes for the Minnesota Vikings, and for good reason, given the repeated blows this franchise has suffered at the foot of its kicking game. You can even throw Kari Vedvik's name into the mix of kicking pariahs. Though that disaster was contained to a 3-week stretch of 2019 training camp, but remains an embarrassment for this franchise. Damn. Minnesota suffered a 12-point loss, 26-14 to the Tampa Bay Bucks on Sunday, with Bailey missing 10 points worth of kicks. Damn. So I think that this is a perfect example, a perfect thought experiment in what is the worth of a kicker based on their ability to kick and their ability to be consistent. These are things that are expected of any player, whether it be a quarterback or a kicker. You're expected to be consistent. You're expected to be able to perform under pressure. Under pressure. Yes. Okay. The 32-year-old kicker who was signed to replace Carlson in September 2018 missed an extra point and 3 field goals at Raymond James Stadium. Vikings coach Mike Zimmer has been down this road too many times before. Why it keeps happening is perplexing, especially since the Vikings made a change at long snapper a few weeks ago that seemed to remedy some of their issues. And Bailey entered Week 14 as the sixth most accurate kicker in NFL history until you go to kick in Minnesota. But with 3 weeks to go in a stretch where the Vikings 6-7 need to be nearly perfect to make the playoffs, kicking concerns are a major obstacle that might be too much to overcome. If they're not fixed immediately, and there's no guarantee that cutting Bailey and signing whoever is available on the free agent market will be an easy fix, Minnesota's day of reckoning will come sooner than expected by the one phase of the game that's haunted them for years. And I mean, anybody who's a football aficionado, you know, Minnesota and their kicking game has been the doom of them for damn near 30 years. Morton Anderson. I mean, is that I know that rings plenty of bells for plenty of people who remember their game against them Dirty Birds in the NFC title game, where Minnesota was on the brink of going to the Super Bowl and they missed the kick. The kick that would have won it. They missed it. But Minnesota has a long, disgraceful history of bad kicking in clutch moments. And, and it's usually from guys who are historically the clutchest of clutch. So it must be some kind of bad juju from the Vikings organization itself. There must be somebody who did something in a past life in Minnesota that's now being wrought back, and they're having to feel the wrath of that bad luck every time they're close to accomplishing something noteworthy. But it says here, I don't know right now, Zimmer said, Bailey didn't get a vote of confidence from Zimmer that his roster spot would be safe after a rough few weeks. I don't know right now, Zimmer said. He kicked good during the week, this week, so we'll just have to make a decision and go with it. I like the kid a lot. Like I said before, I've had tons of confidence in him. He's had a very good year. He had a couple of bad weeks now, but we can't throw away 10 points and things like that. Hey, you know what? For the head coach, a loss like this, where your kicker leaves 10 points on the board, that's a freebie for the head coach. He can blame that on the kicker. He can blame him. And people will accept that because, yes, that was the kicker's one job. Kick the ball in between the uprights. That's your only job. So if you can't do it, then hey, I can't be blamed for what you can't do because I'm not kicking the ball. That's a specialty position. That's a specialist position. You kick the ball. I've hired enough kickers. You're supposed to be one of the best ever. It's a freebie for a head coach. You can lose the rest of the games out here in this season if he keeps missing kicks. And nobody's going to blame the head coach on that. Just a little perspective there. It's not just Dan Bailey. We gave up a 50-yard throw because a couple of guys weren't in the right place. You can't do that either. If you guys want me to fire guys for making a mistake here, a mistake there, then we wouldn't have any players. Let's not put this all on Dan Bailey. That observation is a far cry from Zimmer's infamous "it's a chip shot. He's got to make it" assessment of Walsh's missed 27-yard field goal in the 2015 NFC wildcard round, or the time he sent a curt message to Carlson after a preseason game saying, if he's going to miss field goals, I'm going to have to go for 2. Zimmer has learned that committing psychological warfare on a struggling kicker only makes things worse. He's not trying to throw salt in the wound of a veteran kicker who appears to be broken, and pointed out other areas that contributed to the loss. And that is what's expected of a head coach. That's expected. And that's what he should be doing. He shouldn't be putting it all on Dan Bailey. Now, I'm speaking obviously from a facetious kind of tone when I talk about you're getting a freebie if the kicker keeps screwing up. But from a team aspect, it's never just that guy's fault. How many third downs did that defense have to get off the field? How many third downs did an offense have to get the ball in the end zone to a point where instead they had to go for kicks, where they should have been able to score more points. So, there's always a yin to the yang. And even with this entire scenario here, and I think I'm going to leave it there, even with this entire scenario here with Dan Bailey, there really is a team aspect even to his situation, even though he is kicking the ball. There are people who are on the field who can affect how difficult his kicks are going to be, or whether or not he even needs to kick, before he ever sets foot on the field. So it doesn't always just come down to him. Come down to him. But let's take a look here at the chat. See super chat in here from RC from NYC, and he says, for $5 in their next pick in the draft, the Minnesota Vikings select Sarah Fuller, Vanderbilt University. And that will be the day. That would be pick number 255 of 255. Mr. Irrelevant or Miss Irrelevant in this situation, because she's not going to go out there and kick the ball for any team and think that they're not going to rush her kick and try and block it like they didn't do with Tennessee. But appreciate that super chat there for $5 from RC from NYC. Once again, everybody who is in the chat, appreciate you guys so much. That is going to be where we're going to leave this thing off for this week's Lineman Life podcast. Do not forget to smash the like button. And don't forget, on Wednesday, we have the tier maker stream, where I'm going to be going through and setting up the tiers for each and every team in the NFL, sort of like a power ranking, but a little bit different, a little bit of my own little twist on it. So make sure you hit that bell notification so you can get notified when I schedule that tier maker. It is on every Wednesday at 3:10 p.m. Make sure you come and check that out. Appreciate you guys so much for being in here today on this week, going into week 15 of the NFL. But everyone in the chat, everyone on the live stream, please do me a favor and make sure you like and share this. And I will be catching all of you on the next live stream for the Lineman Life podcast on Wednesday. Hope everyone's staying safe out there and have a good one. I will see all of you guys very soon.